1 year of trading in Tesla stock in 30 days is the title of our show today, and we also take a look at our usual health tips. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. We also wanted to thank our Patreon supporters as well as our subscribers. If you enjoy the show, please take time to subscribe. So we're in an interesting period right now for Tesla. As you've noticed, we've done a number of shows in a row. There's a huge amount of activity going on. As you've noticed thus far, there's been a movement of Tesla stock price from, let's call it $340 to $430 a share, and it's only been about 2 weeks. And so it's our belief, and why we chose the show title we did today, that we're going to enter, I want to say, an insane period of change. And a lot of folks are looking for what the normal is, but there's a new normal that's sort of emerging as China sort of bears in on what happens with Tesla. So there are a number of ways that we wanted to cover this, but I thought about it and I called a banker yesterday to ask him about the fact that a lot of people were hoping that the sales in China would start immediately after production started. So if you've noticed, there have been about 300 cars being produced and shipped out a day at least from the factory. Tesla's saying it's about 280, and that factory is operating 6 days a week. And this has been going on now for at least the last couple of weeks, possibly a month. So what this results in is in theory, that's 1,600 cars a week times, let's say, a month. So there are theoretically 5,000 to 10,000 cars that are sitting out there waiting to be delivered to customers that both gave deposits and have paid for those vehicles, particularly as there's a certain amount of time before they receive them in delivery. So one of the interesting questions that popped up is, how do the sales in China impact Tesla's end of the quarter as of January 1st, 2020, if in fact the customers never received the cars? And the answer was, initially my thought on the answer was, I actually didn't know what would happen there, because Tesla has the money, Tesla has produced the car, but they actually don't have the car in the customer's hands yet. And so the answer we got back from that was that, oh yes, there is a way for the cash to hit the balance sheet, and then those sales could be acknowledged. The reason why those numbers are so important to understand and acknowledge is the fact that if Tesla is producing, a lot of its stock price is determined on, what are the current quarterly numbers been and what does the future look like, are the two sort of big impactors on what the stock price looks like. So if you have a situation, so for example, right now, it's the 3rd of January, 2020. We're now preparing for Tesla to first deliver how many, Anthony just listed 112,000 deliveries in Q4. So Tesla just delivered a number in terms of how many cars were delivered. The actual expected number was actually 106,000 plus or minus by the analyst community. So that number sort of gives a snapshot of where Tesla is currently. And so what we're fascinated by is that those numbers don't reflect any of the China impact. And so what you have to do then is take that 112,000 in deliveries and then add on to it, let's call it, we want to say 18,000 vehicles, but it could be, let's say, 6,000 to 18,000 is the number of deliveries you'd add to include the money that came in from the China activity. So what this suggests then is that Tesla's numbers are much stronger than analysts might have anticipated. And so now we're going to have a reaction from the marketplace in terms of those numbers. And you also have to add in what's actually going forward in the China space. So why we think this is a big deal, why China is huge, is that in the good old days of 6 months ago, a year or two ago, stocks tended to move in a steady movement pattern in that fashion. And then if you wanted to buy or sell or trade, you have a month, 2 months, 3 months to figure it out and then execute your trades. Now, as we get these numbers that are flying quickly, it's created a nightmare where the hedge funds can react quickly, or investors like yourself can react quickly. But it also leaves a situation where you basically have to be on your game early, because most of the profit will be realized and gone before you have a chance to gather yourself. So as a reminder of what we've discussed previously a lot, is the fact that information will come out. For example, we just got that 112,000 number, and thanks to the viewer who mentioned it. So what will then happen is the hedge funds can react to that quickly. So there's a $6 up for the stock at this point. The next period, as we discussed, over the next 3 business days, which takes us into the middle of next week, is analysts will write reports driven by what those numbers say. They'll then hand those reports, either good or bad, to the large institutional owners. And then all of a sudden, we're going to see a movement of the stock price in a strong way. And it could be up, it could be down. Obviously, with the numbers being well ahead of expectations, we think the numbers will bode well for the stock and cause it to be up. But the point being, though, that literally the hedge funds move quickly and bake in all of that into their models, and therefore they have a price that they're willing to pay for the stock and expected where it's going as to why they're buying that stock. On the flip side of that, obviously the numbers could be going negative or down, and clearly that's not the case currently. So we kind of bring this up because if you're involved with Tesla as an owner, as a shareholder, etc., all the action that you would have expected to see, be it a 10, 20, 30% rise in shares, instead of that giving you a 6-month to a year-long process, it tends to be these fairly intense jerks surrounding earnings or other significant things that could affect earnings. And so if you're interested in profiting from it, you kind of have to prepare for when that's going to occur and then respond accordingly. So we deliberately chose today's show to focus on this because, as Tesla has shown previously, they typically announced the number of vehicles for this quarter that have been sold on the 3rd of January, or 3 days after all the numbers have come in. But this then leaves a speculative period between now and February, when they actually announce the full earnings look as to what all those numbers mean. Are they actually profitable? Were there any sneaky expenses that you didn't anticipate that show up, et cetera? So there are a number of things that could definitely affect the stock price, heading in. But in general, we'd have to say that if you have a company that sold more than you expected in the last quarter, and then the expected numbers, given that China's entering the marketplace, are going to be stronger, and we'll find out how strong based on how many vehicles they've sold. It sort of drives a narrative on where the stock is going. The next thing I wanted to review is something I call obvious guides to where we're at and where we're going. So one of the numbers that popped up that we thought was really powerful, that discussed where China was impacting Tesla, is that in November it was announced that there were 5,000 registrations, or 5,000 plus registrations of Model 3s mostly, but Teslas in China. So this was huge because last year in November, the registrations was, I believe, 389 vehicles. So you'd ask the question, why is that? Can it continue to occur? And the answer is that when you look at the numbers, the average price of a Tesla last year was the average price of Tesla from last year for a purchase of vehicle, I think was approximately $110,000, because not only did they have to pay for the Model S or X, but there's also a 25% tariff plus a tax that hit it. So the top of the lines were in the 150 range for the Model X and probably in the 110 range for the Model S's. And so now, before we even get to these Model 3s, the price point without the tariff and taxes was $63,000 approximately for the dual motor long range, and then maybe a few grand more for the performance. So you could see, as the stock price of vehicles was falling, the impact that it was having on elevating the volume of sales. So we kind of bring this up because you get sort of an obvious inference of where the trend is going. So now, as we're dropping from a $63,000, let's say, average price until now, with their China-built Model 3 arriving, that price is now dropping down to $42,000. And so once we drop down in that price category, that's 20 grand below almost. And so that $42,000 price point, probably the average price of vehicles for the middle class is in that $30,000, $32,000 range. And as we've discussed, there are a lot of Chinese that are eagerly willing to spend an extra 5 or 10 grand to get a foreign-built quality vehicle that's a luxury car that Tesla is. So our sort of overall assessment of this is that, it's pretty awesome. The one negative that pops up here that you actually have to acknowledge is the fact that, yes, Tesla has, well, the original sort of subsidy for the government was $3,500, but there's been an additional, so there are two different types of subsidies. There's a consumer-based subsidy where the consumers are getting initially the $3,500, but it was just announced that there's like a $2,500 from the government to the car company subsidy, and that results in the price dropping into evidently the $42,000 range. And I guess you could argue this is bad because, in theory, Tesla should just keep the money because they don't have enough cars to sell right now anyway, based on the number of people that reserved at that $50,000 price point. And you've already given them $3,500 off to $4,700, and now you have this further discount. But evidently, the further discount was a further incentive provided by the government that Tesla was required to hand out. And so it's not necessarily out of Tesla's pocket. They still get the higher revenue numbers, but consumers get a better deal, driving even more sales towards Tesla's direction. So what we're sort of reviewing in general is the fact that there are all these positive drivers to why the sales in China will be stronger. I saw a quick note there that said, 280 vehicles a day, higher than what was going on in Fremont. Clearly there were some lessons learned. We thought it was weird though, because like I said, it's a 6-day work week. This is one shift. The plan right now, based on new hiring, is for Tesla to go to 2 shifts. So if you multiply the 280 times 7 days times 52 weeks, it works out 87,000 vehicles. The target number articulated by Tesla was to sell somewhere in that 200,000 range in year 1, ramping up to 500,000. But it wasn't clear when that ramp would occur. It's possible. The body language from Elon Musk was that the 10,000 per week target would start sometime in 2020, maybe midsummer. So we think that obviously all this is great news, and it really shows why, as China tacks on these extra, let's call it 200,000 vehicles a year, we now end up with Tesla's initial run being about 400K. Then we have another 200,000 vehicles added by China that we can kind of see that actually might be higher if, in fact, we have more shifts. There's a bunch of other things that could raise that number. And so basically what you're seeing is very steady, nice growth for the number one business, which is the car business. And then as we see the addition of numbers coming in from solar roofs, as well as the energy business, et cetera, there are a lot of tranches of new revenue and profit that are impacting how Tesla's doing. And so we think that all of this is terrific news and has excellent implications relative to the forward progress of the company. So I wanted to sort of run through some of these because as you're thinking about, do I buy, do I sell, do I hold, it gives you an opportunity to sort of ride some of the data curve because if you make a decision and you're thinking about doing something, it's not like, a GE or Microsoft, some of these guys that are very long-term stable companies in terms of how their stock prices move. I believe it sort of pushes you into a position where you really need to sort of think about what you're going to do and make your decision sooner than later, given that there's really no delay. The other variable that's going to happen that we think between now and earnings is what we call upgrades and downgrades. So as you've seen, the big analysts have an opportunity to shape what's going to happen with the stock price by 15 or 20 points in the short term until we see numbers to support that. And so we've been impressed to see some people still downgrading the stock, others are upgrading it, and you're seeing movement of the stock price consistent with that. But with this announcement of numbers, I really think it forces all of them to move in a certain way. Anthony's been keeping up. We're at $439 pre-market, so the stock closed at about $430. So it's clear that the hedge funds, et cetera, are pushing forward. The last variable that we wanted to review that you already know about is the fact that there is a hedge fund war going on where it went from 25% of Tesla shares had been shorted to that number had dropped to 20 over recent weeks. So another variable that sort of presses Tesla into this strange phenomenon of a year's worth of stock movement happening in 30 days is there are a lot of hedge funds that are still riding the story of Tesla going out of business. And so that first $9 that we just saw is good, but unlike other stocks of its size, et cetera, Tesla has this sort of secret rocket fuel of the fact that those folks who are short the stock are going to now have to make a decision when they're going to get out of their short positions. And as they do that, they have to buy a lot of shares in order to exit in a timely fashion. So this is one of the rocket fuel elements because if a lot of those folks decide to do that at the same time, you could see a very explosive upward movement in the stock, as they try to buy their way out of their short position. And therefore, you also get a nice kick to the stock price in that regard as well. So we'll definitely keep you posted on everything here and definitely look forward to encouraging and trying to help you guys make money in the process. So congratulations to Tesla on the number of cars produced. Congratulations on the fact that those cars do not include the China cars that were already produced and paid for, which they have the cash for, but that it further adds fuel to that fire. The killing of the Baghdad general issue, certainly, the stock market is down $300. And so if it wasn't down pre-market $300, one could think that the push up for Tesla could even be greater rather than where it's at currently. I guess that whole situation is fascinating to me because if Iran really wants to be provoked into an aggressive forward war here, you could see a real slaughter there quickly, which would be unfortunate for a lot of people. But I hope that situation is worked out quickly to sort of calm it down so you don't have other issues, but certainly how it might affect supply of oil coming from that region is certainly a discussion topic that's affecting both the market and the price of oil currently. So we wanted to, we have a story idea we've been working on that I think is pretty interesting that I wanted to have you guys think about, and we can get into it more, and that is that there's a concept I call Giga 5, and that is that there's an interesting thing, which is Tesla has an assembly facility in Tilburg, the Netherlands. And what's interesting about that place is that if Tesla was so inclined, they could actually build a gigafactory, much like what's in San Jose, in about 90 days. And why that's a big deal is that it's a way Tesla could add unit volume nicely. So for those who don't know it, Tilburg is where Tesla put an assembly facility. The way it works is that Tesla ships cars from Fremont, but the cars are separated. The drivetrain of the vehicle travels separately from the body of the car, and they arrive at different times in Tilburg. It takes about 2 to 3 hours for them to marry all those parts together to create a new car, and they even have a test track inside that allows them to complete this facility or complete the car. And the reason why they're doing that is that by shipping in separate components like that, they eliminate the 10% EU tariff. So once those cars are married together again, they're then shipped off by rail or ship or wherever to wherever it's going to Europe, and they eliminate that tariff. What was interesting to note, and we looked it up, based on a quote from the company, is that what they don't cover is the fact that this facility does not have paint, and it doesn't have a stamping facility to create car parts, external car parts, doors, etc. And so what's fascinating to us is the fact that if you simply add the missing components being stamping ability for car parts as well as a paint space for those parts, you now are able to, in theory, have a new gigafactory, and all you'd have to do is set up those two elements either in a building next door in the current parking lot or nearby, and then marry battery and other components coming from around the world, and you have a new gigafactory done using the core of what you already have there. So we wanted to bring this up today because what we've noticed is some of our suggestions have actually caused a change in corporate policy at Tesla. And this is one that I really think bears consideration because you already saved the 10% on EU tariffs, A, and B, you get a new giga rolling rapidly, and then C, even if you didn't have those parts that are coming out of that new facility go into a new car, you now have a source for spare parts for a lot of vehicles that are sitting idle, waiting on parts in different parts of the world. So it'd be interesting to see if this is baked in, and we look forward to seeing what the responses might be from the folks at Tesla. Any rate, wanted to note that as we close out, wanted to sort of field questions you might have. Again, congratulations to Tesla on 112,000. This is a really interesting situation because note the number of analysts that predicted Tesla would miss the number and therefore suffer greatly with a halving of the stock price. And obviously that hasn't occurred. We also wanted to note to you, we have our usual health tips. Consider some kind of fasting, perhaps the 5-2 diet is a suggestion. We also wanted to encourage you, the 25 leg lifts is a really great idea to help maintain your quad muscles, and it strengthens the knees. Also, don't go to bed within 2 hours of eating, preferably 4. Let the food digest. And then we also wanted to, say thank you to all of you that have come forward with hellos and comments on our show as we've been live. And we look forward to sort of what happens next. Again, with the 112,000 that was just announced by Tesla for sales, combined with the addition of those Chinese, I think that we'll see some really cool movements of stock. $9 already is a sign of what the reaction of the market is. But obviously, we think that number could go a lot higher in the process. At any rate, again, in German we say Tschüss, macht's gut. In French, au revoir, lihitraot. Hebrew, Choda Hafez, Farsi. in Zdravstvuyte, Russian, Ni hao ma, Chinese, indeed. Good comment, Jerry. I mean, it's good that this guy was killed, I guess, but on the other hand, is that a really good deal in terms of creating instability? And excellent question. Dovidenia from our friend Vladimir. At any rate, have a great day. Bye for now. We look forward to our next conversation. We do have some really cool shows planned, in particular focused on how impactful Tesla will be in China. Have a great day. In Jamaica, we say, enough respect, walk good, Brother Donovan. Mm-hmm.